But yeah, we've got a bit of an award going on with the amount of clinics that people have done on NMRAX. There's a few front runners there, and one of them's Joey here from Touch of the Brush Model Weathering. And Touch of the Brush, he's pretty good with the brush on the snare drum as well. So, that's not too bad. But anyway, Joey, I think you're going to do something with some rocks. So welcome, and we'll hand it over to you.
Well, thank you, Marty. Appreciate everybody being out here. It's a great weekend. And David, you did a great job in your clinic previous, and it's really, really cool to see all that technology. Today, we're going to be working with part 2, which is carving rocks from foam, but we're going to do some coloring as well as some foliage. And I got my wonderful apron on here, so that way we can get started with some coloring. And I'm going to switch over to the diorama that we started on our last clinic. So I'm going to go really quickly here. All right. I got a nice background here with all my. All right, there we go. Perfect. So this is the stuff that we learned how to carve in the first clinic, and now I discussed in the first clinic that after you carve, you definitely want to put a primer color on either some really, really light gray or white. That way, you have something to work with and to clean off if you decide to clean off some of the coloring. Because if you just use paint, then it could seep right into the foam and you will be able to change it or redo it in that sense. Now I have 2 separate examples here. One is just the primer itself, which I'm going to do some coloring on here. And here I use just regular gray paint, the simple acrylic flat gray paint you get at any hobby store like Hobby Lobby or even Walmart. And I added some of the white primer color and some of this acrylic that I have way over here. And this stuff works really, really great for a lot of different projects that I use. And it looks like snow. And it was a very simple, a little bit on the foam brush here, and just a little bit at a time, just little dabs. And now it looks like you have snow on top of your foam. And of course, you could go in to this and make it really more detailed. But if you have rocks that are way far in the background and you have a snow scene or a snow diorama, and your rocks aren't really the forefront of what you want the viewer to see as the main focus point, then this is something this simple can really, really show and express the environment in which your diorama is being presented. So with that too, another little neat trick that we can do, and I was going to do this ahead of time, but I decided now would be probably the best time to do it. I have some clear glue and some Elmer's glue, and heck, even scenic cement will work too from Woodland Scenics. All this stuff here, and some of this is a little wet, and I put a little bit in a cup, and you can do an effect of where you can dab it on. And if it's especially thick glue, like this stuff's pretty thin, I thinned it out, but if you have really, really thick glue, you can make it look like it's wet. It will stay wet. I sort of made that mistake a few years ago when I created my very first rocks, and the layout was based in the Poconos, in the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania, and I made the rocks look really, really wet because the glue dried on top of the rocks. I didn't want that, but it made the rocks really look like they were wet. And I thought that was really, really interesting and easy way to create wet rocks. And so you can do that as well. Even just some simple paint and glue will work too. And I do have some glue here, so I have some on my finger, and you see it's white. It will dry clear over time. And it can look like it's getting wet and dripping down here all the way. and it's going to give a very, very, I know it's really hard to see on here, but it's really going to give a nice clear coat, and where it look like the rocks are wet or like the snow is melting. And then you can always add the realistic water or some of the waterfall effects from a variety of different scenery companies, and look like icicles and all that too. So that's a simple, easy, and affordable way to make the rocks look like they are they're wet or being or the snow is melting. So we're going to first go into the coloring of this portion of the rocks, and I like to start with a gray color. And now I use a lot of slate gray. There's a variety of different gray pigments you can use with Woodland Scenics. You can also dilute the acrylic paints, and I like to dilute it. I would say if it's going to be about 5 parts paint, 7 to 8, 9 parts water. It all depends how thick you want the color to look on the rocks. And what I like to do a lot of times is have a little piece of foam to spare, and I would color a little section of the foam to see how what the color and the diluting, how it's diluted, is going to look like. And so here I have just about the right mixture that I use, and I'm going to put, let's see here, I'm going to have a little bit this gray down here ready. Actually mix this slate gray with a little bit of a pewter gray and a little bit of black to get the color I want. Again, it's all based on what you want on your rocks. And this is the leopard spotting technique is what I use here. So it is pretty light going to start with. And make sure you have a towel underneath if you're working in a different area. If you're working on a layout that hasn't been done, it's okay. Let that paint just and pigment drip down. We don't have to worry about it being a mess. So now you can really tell a dark how it's being dark in here, and it's like just like the first coat. And this is practically the color that I'm using. I mean, it's pretty light. And again, I'm going to do a mix of different colors in here as well. So you just let it drip on, let it flow naturally. Don't have to paint each individual thing. You can if you like to, but I let things fall naturally. Okay. All right, so we have that there. Now, the next color I use is a brownish color. Now, I usually use a burnt sienna or burnt umber pigment. I don't have any, so I decided to use a burnt umber color latex paint, and I mixed with some black in it, so it's kind of this milky, muddy color here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour it into my cup here, and we're going to use that as our next color. And you can see how much the color is going to change on these rocks. And now you don't want to do the full thing. Actually, a little more. Actually, this is a different color. This is the has a little brown tint in it, but this is more of a darker gray. And actually, what we're going to do is we're going to use the gray that I use, which is my favorite color, which is the nutmeg brown. And I'll show you here. It's a simple paint by 50 cents in Walmart or in the little hobby shops here, nutmeg brown. What I'll do is here, we got just a little bit of water, and I'll mix a little bit of that paint together. You want to start with not a lot of paint, and from there you can really judge on how diluted you want it. So it's going to be kind of this milky color, brown, and it's a pretty light color. And to me, you can see how now you're giving the rock some little more texture, but the brown showing some dirt. And I like the color all the rocks, and I'm letting it just fall on naturally wherever they fall. And I'll show you in a quick video how I did the larger diorama, and that will be the one we will work on as far as showing simple foliage. Now, I could have made this a little too light for me, but that's when I go back with some black. And the black is not really for color, it's really to show out the details in the rock. And if you have plaster molds, this is the best pigment to use. It really shows all the little details in the rocks in either your carvings or your plaster molds. So really darken this up just a little bit more. And we're going to go back. Now, normally you will let this dry each coat. And since we're doing a demonstration here, it's not going to look as correct. Right now I'm showing you how to just do the simple techniques on how I color it. And I'll show you what the coloring looks like in the next portion of this clinic. And you just constantly do coat and coat to coat to coat as much until you feel like it's really ready to go and ready for your own foliage and ground cover and whatnot, trees, bushes, shrubs. And you can constantly just make it go here. And so now you have a little gaps here. You can fill it in with bushes or tree, or if you have something like a building in front of you, you can always block something like that. That's never a big deal. So now with tons of different coats, I was able to create something like this. And I don't know if this light would make it too bright, but let me pull away a little bit. I think that would be a little better. Now you can probably see a lot more. Let's see here. You can see the difference in the rocks already. They're not really white anymore. And here is the final result after a few coats of the paint and pigments that I used for coloring the rocks. And now I'll quickly show you a quick video on just the process on how I colored these rocks here. And we'll go to share screen. Occasion window. And there's no sound in this video, but we're going to go very quick, as you can see here, using some of the slate gray, really mixing it together, and using the same techniques that I showed you, just dabbing the color onto the rocks. You want to make sure you get, especially with foam, you really want to get into the little nooks and crannies, the little cracks in the foam after you're carving. And so sometimes it will take a few coats, even after you use some primer. And here using some of that nutmeg brown and a little bit of the burnt umber color. Mix that together, a little more water till I get the texture that I wanted. And here's it's a lot more thicker. And also having some of the rock brown show some dirt. And also sometimes it have a little less chances of, well, you may have to use a little less I would say, ground cover. All right, use a little bit of a rainy day light color gray, mix that with a little bit of the brown together. And I gave it some highlights on the rock, so that it won't be the same exact color gray throughout the entire rock cut. You'll have a variety of different shades of grays, and as well as all different browns. And here we got a little bit of the black going now. And you can see in the rocks all the different shades of gray and all the different browns in there. And again, this is the base for your scenery for this particular diorama. Again, you could go in here and really super detail the colors and paint the rocks as much as you want. You see we have a lot more the black in here, a little darker gray, a little bit of gray, actually a little gray in the black. And they really put it on thick. So now you really see all the little cracks in the carvings that you make. And now here I use a blow dryer to blow dry and dry the pigments in the paint. And it works. Doesn't really, but here's other pictures of the before and after, and you can see all the different kinds of colors inside the rocks. And from there, we're going to go on and work and start the scenery portion now. Okay. Now, so my favorite is doing some ground cover work and creating scenery using natural materials. And there's plenty of natural materials in our world. And all you have to do is step right outside and you can find plenty of things that you can use for your scenery work. And I got a few examples right here. I have ground black pepper. Well, not really. This is really, really fine shifted rock. I took a little pile of rock out of our backyard that I found and sifted it into a variety of different sizes of rock. And the best part is, guys, this is all free. It's right outside in God's creation right there for you. All here is crushed up leaves, coarse leaves, right from the ground. And here is really fine leaves, crushed up right in the blender. And now we have here some woodland scenics, some just really, really fine ground, dirt ground cover. And some fine turf as well. Now I'm going to get my big thing of glue because you might need this big thing of glue. I don't think so. Maybe not for this diorama, but you never know. Pour some here. And find yourself a really, really cheap paintbrush because it will be needed. And what I like to do is slightly dilute my glue just slightly. Doesn't have to be too thick. You don't want it too runny either. And I'm going to get my cheap paintbrush that I quite use and mix it all up here there's a lot of mixing going on in this clinic, as you can see. And here, see how's wet. You can even use that for creating wet rocks as well. So I'm going to get a basic coat. You're just going to paint it right on, right to your baseboard. Okay, before it dries, again, I like using natural materials first. And you might get some coarse clumps here and there. Heck, for all we know, that could be little pieces of bark, branches, leftover wood from a pallet. And it's not evenly, well, it's not even all around. Some lumps here and there. That could maybe the ground's not perfectly level, and no ground in the world is perfectly level. Especially if you live in the Ozark Mountains, we know that. Okay, and there you go. It's just simple like that. And what I do after that, I have very diluted glue and water, 75, I would say 60% water and 40% glue mixed in here. There's a little bottle, and I squirt it on, and it really covers it. And now we can layer it. Now, if you want to use some rocks or some simple fine green turf or some grass here and there, you absolutely do it. And I like to go high up and go lightly. You don't have to go. Save it. The stuff's pretty expensive, you know. And so now another thing we can do with the rocks. Now the rocks look pretty bare, so we can really go into the I'm going to move this camera over just slightly. There we go. And I'm going to go inside the rocks themselves. And the way to do that is I'm going to take some of this mixed water and glue from the paintbrush, and I'm going to go in here. In some spots, I'm going to blow some of that green onto the rocks. Now I'm going to turn to me a little bit. I'm not going to be too close, but it's simple as taking some of this and, I mean, just like that, you know, it's so simple and easy to do to create some moss and some grass and growing onto the rocks themselves. So I'm going to get up here a little bit. That's how you get all this stuff inside the rocks here. Just some simple. So let's see. I'm gonna get the top of here. I want some of this, and over here. And do the same thing. And you can find there are certain scenery supplies, like Scenic Express, one of the scenics that I love, that's way more realistic looking than the stuff I have here. And and it would make it look even better. And now we can even do some of that dirt on here too. And you can see the rocks are really coming to life here. A little closer. Okay, now add some of this fine dirt and do the same thing. Now we're going to, I always like to not just put complete grass down. I want to add some glue on the top here so we can add some ground cover on top. Now, let's see here. We're going to go and get some of that fine stuff, which are those natural leaves. And if you don't want to waste it, I mean, heck, do this. Especially when you get on the very edges. And there's many varieties of different combinations of ground cover you can do. Depends on what you're modeling, the area you're modeling, specifically where you're modeling. Okay, so now there's your basic ground cover, and very simple. You have it all right there on top, and then you can start planting some of your trees. And here I have a few trees that I've made with simple polyfiber that are in stuffed animals. I think it's like $3.50 for a big bag of it. You could probably, I don't know, fill up Alan McLennan's layout, a huge basement of it, and with just 1 or 2 bags, if not just one. And just very simple technique here. And I'll show you one. This is all one that I created. And I took the tree armatures from Woodland Scenics, and the polyfiber comes white. You can see it's all white in here. And I spray painted with a camouflage brown spray paint at first, let that all dry. And then I came back with a can of like the Loctite spray adhesive. Not the really heavy duty, because you won't able to get any of those trees off your fingers. So just letting you know right now, your fingers will be stuck together too. But if you go like the multi-purpose medium adhesive, it works the best in my experiences. And from there, what you call it, you sprinkle either your full foliage or your green, whatever you want to do, and that's how you create some of your trees. Now, I prefer the Super Trees by Scenic Express for my foreground, but I like using these trees for background use. And since there's, for example, here, punch them right in the ground here. Let's see, I do have an older super tree. Let's say they want to put that in the front somehow. Okay. Now we're going to take some of the background trees here, and you don't even need a Woodland Scenics tree armature or even a twig or anything. You can stick these guys right on here just like that if you want. So I've got a few of these here. And let's see here, I have a few more that you can circle around. And some pine trees that have some naturally sitting here. And I guess we get another one. So really, your rocks have become the background. And you can really start seeing a diorama set coming to life here. And your focal point may just be right here, okay? And so for instance, we'll move this out of the way here. We'll put them back. And we're going to take some more of that glue. And I'm going to put something here, some here, and maybe some over here too. I got some clump foliage from Willisinics that I have. Now I don't know how much time for this stuff to dry, so I don't know if it's going to stick well either here, or even better, to be honest, is some more glue. And especially for this clump, really thicken this up, since it's really going to be blocked by clump foliage here. So and I normally have a lot of the ground cover to dry over time. Take a little bit of that glue. Let it happen a little naturally. Glue down here. All right, a little bit of glue. There we go. Now that will all stick together like that underneath. And now we're gonna add, oh, I don't know, some real twigs. Maybe that's an old bark that was broken down. An old one here. Let's see what we got in my little bag here. Now we have a little opening in these gaps here, so why not? Now making things look natural, don't forget. Right here, we may add some fallen rock. So take that thick glue. I mean, really thick. Okay. Try to get a grip on them. Oh, we got some natural grass growing in there. Some wood have fell down. There we go. Now, even you could take these little branches, paint them different colors. It could be scrap loads, debris on the floor, or maybe there's you want to create a car accident or a train hitting a vehicle. I know it's not so nice to say, but things make it look realistic. You can look when you paint those little pieces of wood. You can create just parts on the ground, debris, garbage on the sides of the tracks. Okay, so now we have a little rock slide going on. Okay, we're going to keep this right there, a little piece of wood, because I have a little lifelike building that I found. And I am going to put the shed right here. Just like that. Simple little shed. And now we're going to take some of those trees that we had originally. Pop Pop it right back in. Maybe we put this one over here. Let's place that for now. So you got really a diorama coming to life, and you really just started with just carving rocks from the foam. And now you see the rocks look a lot more natural. They look like they belong there, even though we know it's just pink foam or any kind of foam. All right, so the next step, I'm going to use a little blended turf here on my shelf. And a little blended turf is a nice little color here. Has some highlights to it, some little different shades here, and it will highlight. Trees. And over here, very sifted, is the finest stuff that I got from the ground. And this is the most sifted out of all the rocks, and it's just pure ash and dust from the rocks. And you need to hold your breath for this stuff. So we're going to create a little pathway here, and I'm going to be I want to be in the way, but we're going to make it natural as much as possible. Okay, take a little building off for a second. Let me get in there. So now it has a little bit of gravel walkway going on. We're going to move this over here. And then inside this little container, I do have some little pieces of twig. And so what you got to do is just break a few little pieces. And it's looking like someone's about to cut some of that off. And now we're going to get some more of that wonderful clump foliage. And maybe we want to put a little bush there. All right. And so for here, you do have a pretty much simple diorama that started with just carving the rock from the foam and just taking some trees and some of these simple techniques on the ground cover using foliage to make the rocks pop out really creates the scene. And I mean, you could do the same blowing techniques if you want to create snow. The woodland cynics makes the like a fine snow, and you can use that and blow that on as well, and it can look like icicles or snow drifts. Same thing for the trees. And actually, since we are fixing these trees up, we can use some of the spray adhesive here. I call it the hobby hairspray, and hairspray will work as well, but we can add a little bit of white too, and that's okay. It will dry clear. Okay. It wants stuff to rain and fold naturally. So now you have some on the roof of the building yourself. some on top of the trees. It looks like the trees are turning color. So that's one side. And we got a few more minutes. I would do something rather a little different here. It's like a multiple diorama. Okay, let's move this over just a hair. Okay. Wasn't really planning on doing this little part, but since I have a little more time, I will do this little section right here. And we're gonna do something a little more different. Okay, so this is pretty white looking, but we're gonna spruce this up with just some paint. And it's gonna be very, very, very simple. And do it very, very quickly. Paint some of this on here. So really you can see some close up. Now we use some of the brown mix. Some more of that gray. There we go. I'm going to get some of that brown. And then we're going to, let's see, add some, a little more of that color in there. So here it is. I can mix a little bit of the water over here with some of that brown paint. And now I'm going to see if I could go mute for a second so I can quickly dry this little portion of the rocks, to blow dry it, and see if that works. Okay, so I'm muted here, some drying. There we go. Okay. Much better. Now we get to get some of that glue. Paint it downward a little bit here. Get the whole thing covered with glue this time. Okay. Now we're going to add some of the blended turf. Okay, move it over, just try and adjust it for the color. Because it looks a lot light on my screen than what it really is, but that's okay. And then from there, we're going to add some rocks. I'm going to try to catch some of them while they fall. Okay. Now add some of that diluted glue to soak everything up. And then I'm going to add, let's see, some glue here. Put some trees over here. Okay, I'm going to use some of the spray. And I want to add a little more green to it here. And then add a little more of this. And add some of that blended turf. You can take a piece of paper, put the foliage on the ground cover on a piece of paper and do it too, if you want to directly use it on one specific part. But I wanted to finish this part exactly. All right, and then from here, for the final touches over here. And now you have a diorama on the left side. You might possibly have a cage, or you can continue the diorama any further. And there you have it. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. Feel free to ask them, and I'm more than happy to answer them. I'll make sure. Make sure my volume's all the way up here.
Okay, well that it works a lot better if I actually hit the mute button and hit the camera button. But then again, I'm new at this, so
Yeah.
you'd think by now that I might have actually been able to work it all out. But we'll have a little look here at what questions we've got. There's some coming in the chat. So Dan was wanting to know. Do you like WS pigments? I take it that means woodland scenics, or diluting acrylics better?
I prefer the woodland scenics pigments only because they're pigments already, and I've been using them for a long time. So it's based on experiences, but with more and more experience, it seems like based on cost, the acrylics can work just as well. And the pigments sometimes are they're natural, the colors to where the woodland scenics chose those colors for specific reasons, whereas the colors for your paints, if you game acrylic paints, you may have to do some experiments with them. So for if you're a beginner or you're doing a great big section of scenery, I prefer the pigments. If you're going to go really into detail with a lot of your rock work, I would look into doing the research on the colors and matching the colors of the rocks from the prototypes and using acrylics and see where you go from there.
Cool. Yeah, Clark made a statement that he wouldn't use anything else but woodland scenics pigments, but up there in the back blocks of Canada. And then we had well, it wasn't so much of a question, but Andy made a statement of when he heard you mentioning that no ground in the world is perfectly level. He was thinking of the strategically placed bumps that we put in our cricket pitches over here in Australia, especially when England are coming out. And then he humbly apologised afterwards because I mean they have just lost the one-day international over there. We won't get into that anyway.
Yeah.
Going down a bit further, does he put logos on the shelf behind the scenery work when he's weathering the rolling stock at the same time? Rail scenes. I think he was having a bit of a laugh there when you were blowing the scenic material onto the rock face. And he's talking about what about cheap hairspray for light glue? Have you ever used that?
I do use cheap hairspray. I do have a can of it. I do prefer the Loctite spray adhesive, which is these cans here. And 3M also makes a heavy duty spray as well. But I mean, that's heavy and very expensive. And let me tell you, that stuff's tough to get off your fingers. And so the Loctite is a good between the cheap hairspray and that 3M. That's why I use Loctite.
Okay, I guess if you use the Loctite stuff, you're gonna end up with a gluey smell, and if you use the hairspray, you could end up with a nice lavender smell or whatever the hairspray is.
Yeah, you may have people knocking on your door if they want to get a haircut.
Yeah. So. And Andy was also asking, what are the red-orange trees?
That's polyfiber. They need a little tender loving care at the moment. They've been in the box for a long time. I actually found them. And here are the polyfiber it's white, comes out white in a big bag. You make stuffed animals and pillows with them. And I take a bunch, break into different pieces, paint it with camouflage brown spray paint. And then when that dries, I take a bunch of glue and spray the trees individually, or you can place them brown on your layout. And I do have a YouTube video for that where I did it for the Smyrna, Tennessee Valley Model Railroad Club, where I put them on brown on the mountain, and then I sprayed all the trees, and then I put all the leaf foliage on there when they're already stuck on the mountain. So you can do either or, but they're very lightweight. It comes in a big bag, and you can do a whole lot of scenery, and these are great background trees for way in the distance. And if I'm going to do something for where the viewer has if I have a scene on the layout and I want the viewer to see something very detailed, I will use a ready-made trees or Scenic Express's super trees.
Cool. Well, Joey, again, that's another brilliant clinic. Live, we had a few comments as well. They were about your camera, that the videos drastically improved from the first time we did a clinic when I think we had a huge thunderstorm rolling through, and your internet all went to dial-up speed, and
Yes.
And it was bad. But no, that was brilliant, and thank you very much for doing another clinic, and we look forward to more of them.
Absolutely, really appreciate the opportunity, Marty. Thank you, everybody. Glad everybody's here hanging out with us this weekend.
Not a problem. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers.